Welcome to the Met Council Community Development Committee meeting for May 3rd, 2021. I'm the Chair, Robert Lilligren. Before we start the meeting, just a few things. We're still working under COVID-19, which is altering our usual procedures, and with Governor Walz's peacetime emergency in response to COVID-19, the Met Council determined it's not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person committee meeting. And so we will be conducting this meeting under Minnesota State Statutes, Section 13D.021. We'll conduct this meeting by WebEx. It'll be recorded. Members of the public will be able to monitor this meeting by going to the agenda online to view the live stream of the meeting. The video is embedded in the website. We all know the guidelines. We'll call a roll for each item. Please just use the chat function for technical difficulties. So we're verbalizing our comments so those listening in can hear them. And if there's no questions on that, I will call this meeting to order by asking Michelle to take attendance to ensure we have a quorum. Michelle, please.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. As I mentioned, Councilmember Mousse will not be attending today. I'll start with Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen. Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Bento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is approval of our agenda, and if there are no objections or changes, we can move on to other business. Any objections or changes to the agenda? Great. Hearing none, the next agenda item is approval of the minutes of the April 19th Community Development Committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Bento moves approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Councilmember. A second?
Cummings seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll on the motion.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Bento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And the minutes are approved, and we can move on to our first business item tonight, which is 2021-109. It's an amendment to the Livable Communities Advisory Committee bylaws, and I believe Ms. Beard is here to present, and also the chair of the Livable Communities Advisory Committee, Mayor Joe Emerson from White Bear Lake. Thanks for being with us, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to ask, I'm assuming the 651 number is Mayor Emerson. Can I just confirm that? Mayor Emerson, are you with us? I'm not hearing anything. Is anyone else? Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, we're not. Mayor Emerson, is that, or who is on that 651 number?
It's currently muted right now.
Mayor Emerson, is that you? 651 2 something 237?
Am I unmuted? It says I'm unmuted.
There you are.
Now
There
you
go.
are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I had done it once, but I don't know. I've never done it on the phone before. I don't know. I've got something going on with my computer. so anyway, so I apologize that I'm
Let her
not
in if
there.
you need to, but she'll know I'm in the CDC meeting. Sorry.
So I will let, I'll just sit back for when it's my time here.
Yeah, I just want to really deeply thank Mayor Emerson for all of her time and commitment to the Livable Communities Act programs and chairing the LCAC. And she's always available and willing to look things over and present with us. So thank you so much, Mayor Emerson. And I'm going to take us through the first few slides, and then Mayor Emerson will join in for a couple as well. So Greg, if you can get us back to the presentation, I think we're ready to go. Thank you. Great. So what are we going to cover today? It's a brief presentation. We'll just give you a quick overview of the LCAC and then a summary of the proposed amendments, none of which are too controversial, I don't think, and then have time for any questions and then a request for council action. Next slide, please. Next slide, I will turn over to Mayor Emerson.
This says this is a Livable Communities Advisory Committee, the LCAC. This advisory committee that recommends livable communities demonstration account and transit-oriented development funding awards. Unlike the LUAC or the MPOSC, this committee is not created in statute. So the LCAC is structured to largely mirror statutory defined advisory committees for consistency and accountability. Oh. I will turn this back to Tara. Tara?
I apologize, I was muted. Thank you, Mayor Emerson. I was just adding to that previous slide that the LCAC has been in action since the beginning of the Livable Communities Act for the full 25 years. So it's a really established and helpful committee. I'm going to start with the first of three primary changes we're proposing to the bylaws, starting with the membership. The LCAC is made up of 14 members and a chair. Those 14 members consist of 2 members each from 7 different areas of expertise. And those 7 areas of expertise are shown before you: local government, that's often a planner, community development coordinator, development finance. Often one person comes from public sector finance and one person comes from private sector finance, development itself. So again, not both nonprofit and private sector developers. Environment, which can be a variety of folks with different expertise in stormwater management, natural resources, greenhouse gas emissions, transportation, site design, and the 7th has been community-based organization. Next slide. And the change we're proposing is to that last category, the community-based organization. And that category was created in 2015. It was intended to create an equity-focused perspective on the committee in response to the equity outcome in Thrive MSP. It's very broadly defined. So within each expertise, we give a few examples of the kinds of professions that would fit that category. And in the community-based organization category, those descriptions often mirror descriptions that are in some of the other categories already, with the exception of community engagement. And so rather than saying, one subject matter expertise on the committee can bring an equity focus to the work, we think that folks within and across all of the expertise categories can bring and provide equity perspective, both lived and professional experience, to the committee. And so we are proposing to slightly amend that category to focus on community engagement, since that's an expertise that we don't currently have represented, and look for at least one of the 2 members in all categories to include, again, that sort of experience addressing equity issues in development. Next slide, please.
Under proposed changes, we have the terms. The terms right now are 3 years with no limits. Participation is demanding. A 3-year commitment may be a barrier to some potential community applicants. And unlimited terms can decrease turnover, limiting opportunities for new voices and perspectives. So in this, what we would recommend 2-year terms with a 2-year limit on consecutive terms.
Next slide, please. Finally, the last changes we're proposing are in regard to officers. These really are sort of administrative tweaks to just be more consistent with how other advisory committees are operated. In the past, the vice chair of LCAC has been voted on by the committee, and that's not the case with any other advisory committees at the council. Normally, the chair of the Metropolitan Council recommends the adoption of the chair and the vice chair of a committee, and so we're proposing to make that change to be consistent. And similarly, the position of a recording secretary and administrative staff at the council, helping with scheduling the meetings, with taking minutes and providing those minutes, distributing agendas, scheduling things, etc., has largely fallen on staff. And so again, consistent with other committees, we're proposing a change in the bylaws that a recording secretary would be a staff person outside of the program officers and the volunteer committee members. And again, that's consistent with other advisory committees. Next slide, please. So that summarizes the changes that are in the red line version of the bylaws that are attached to your business item. We are happy to answer any questions, but the proposed action would be that the Metropolitan Council approve the proposed amendments of the Livable Communities Advisory Committee as shown in business item number 2021-109.
Thank you, Ms. Beard, and thank you, Madam Mayor, and for being here and for your work on this. And so I'll start with one question, and then I'll ask committee members if they have others. But with the change with the addition of the recording secretary to make it more consistent with the other advisory bodies, is there a resource implication on that?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that's a great question, and I'll definitely ask Lisa to jump in if she is so inclined. Lisa and I definitely discussed kind of the role of the recording secretary and the demands of, for example, LUAC or MPOSC across the community development administration team. LCAC operates a little differently in that it's not a little bit of time every month, it's a lot of time over 8 weeks. And so Lisa and I are kind of aware that there are some scheduling challenges. The good news is that LCAC meetings don't start until, I believe, October. So we have a little bit of time to work with our existing admin staff and talk about how we can meet that need. But I'll ask Lisa if she wants to add anything.
Director Barajas, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add or emphasize what Tara said. We don't anticipate, there's no need to add additional FTEs to our budget to support the recording secretary, but we can absorb that within our existing employee account. But like Tara said, the challenge is more in the scheduling and the workload over a short period.
Great, thank you. Committee members, any questions on the report or on the proposed item? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Chair. My question about the term limits would be, is there a reason we don't extend the term limits to non-consecutive terms? So, for example, in St. Paul, before the 80s, the mayoral term was 2-year terms. And so if you look at the history of the mayors, there were some funny staggered terms where people come in for one term for 2 years, get kicked out, come back to office 2 years later, get kicked out. And so why don't we do that for non-consecutive membership?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lee, that's a great question. I think what we're trying to do is balance the need for creating opportunities for folks to come without accidentally creating a situation where we have interested, valuable folks that want to participate, and because of that limit, they can't anymore, even if it isn't a consecutive, even if they haven't served, even if there's been a break since they last served. And most years we have no problem getting a lot of great applicants. And I think that we would continue to try to lean towards new voices when that is an option. But I think given that we could, have some folks, hit their 4-year mark, leave, and then maybe come back at a time that their expertise is really needed, we want to keep that option available. If I understood your question correctly, that would be my response.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss, and then Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you. I just had a question on the membership, Article 2. I understand the emphasis on the community engagement, which is great, and also kind of baking in the equity pieces throughout. However, I'm thinking that we can, like where we have number 7 stricken out completely, I still think it's okay to keep everything after community-based organizations. So it's really clear about the impact from the community engagement efforts. So my recommendation would be to only strike out community-based organizations from 7, and then continue the rest of that statement with the the replaced community engagement section. So in other words, after community engagement, which includes community organizing, arts-based engagement, engagement strategy, etc., and then to address equitable development still applies. All of that still applies to community engagement. And I believe that's important for impact, because we are not doing community engagement simply to check off the box or as an activity. There should be a outcome which is clear to address equitable and address equitable planning and development, etc., related to traditionally underrepresented communities.
Thank you, Councilmember. And so I'm looking down at the struck through draft, and that's what you're reading from the numbers. So that's page 3, right? And I get what the new number 7, what you're saying, but where, if you could please, Councilmember Chambers, where was the other language to address equitable development or something? Is that in here and I'm
Yeah,
seeing it?
that's on my strike through.
Right.
So what it's been changed to is community engagement, and in parentheses it has community organizing, arts-based
Yes.
engagement strategy, and that would be the change.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm saying that we're replacing that with
I see.
community-based organizations, and whatever
Great.
is after the community-based organizations, I believe should stay under community
Okay, so
engagement.
I get it. And the old number 7, so to address equitable
Yes.
development. And I get it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please, Ms. Beard.
Just to be clear on our intent here, if you move into section B under expertise, the number 1, that that we would appoint 2 members from each area of expertise, including the community engagement, appointing at least 1 member from each area of expertise who represents or works directly with historically underrepresented communities, skipping the parens, or has experience advancing equitable outcomes in their area of expertise. So our intent, at least, was to say that that addressing of equitable development is baked into all 7, including the new one. But if that is not, you know, capturing it, I just wanted to maybe clarify.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go for it. Councilmember Chambliss, please.
Yeah, I think that's great. I understand that part, but the composition is different than the intent.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, if I may. So the having experience advancing equitable outcomes in their area of expertise is the specific kind of language we were hoping gets at. Still not there. Okay, I apologize. And thank you for working this out with me.
That's qualifications and what you're looking for in the participants. That's not the same thing as what you're trying to achieve.
Thanks. No, I'm sorry, go for it.
Sorry, one last consideration. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Councilmember Chambliss, where we get at, again, the what we hope to achieve, the outcomes, is what we would hope would, the scoring criteria would be considered by everyone on the committee when they are scoring on our equity criteria. Would be looking for the equitable outcomes for the projects that apply. Are you saying it's about the folks on the committee having experience, not just advancing equitable outcomes, but sorry, I'm trying to make the words match the intent in my own mind. I apologize.
Yeah. So I see two different things here. One is the composition of the team, making sure that they have the kind of skills that you're looking for, and also from the geographic regions that you're looking for. The other is the difference between organizations and engagement. We have taken out community-based organizations and replaced that with community engagement. I still feel that the statement following community-based organizations makes it clearer on the intent of the engagement and in terms of planning and community development for representing traditionally underrepresented communities. And you're saying that is already part of the scoring criteria, but that's fine. I think there should be emphasis that community engagement for community engagement's sake is not enough. It's just not checking the box, but the impact of that engagement and the way that it is done should lead to better representation of the needs of historically underrepresented communities.
Thanks. And
Thank you.
I wonder with Mayor Emerson listening in on this conversation, I wonder, Mayor Emerson, do you have anything to say on this, or what the impact of what Councilmember Chambliss's comments are?
I understand what she's saying, but I understand what staff was trying to do is make sure that we have this representation in the members we select for this committee, so that they have the community organizing, the art space, the engagement strategy. They are engaged in their community. That, I think, was the intent that was being looked for. And so, I mean, I know from speaking with the committee that's currently in place, this is very important to us, and equity is very important. And so we're just trying to, I think, tighten it up and make sure that we make a very concentrated effort to get the people that we need.
Yeah, I think the community-based organization changes are fine. I'm fine with that. I'm speaking to something else, and that's community engagement. But I'm going to stop because maybe somebody else might be able to explain that better than I.
Thanks, Councilmember Chambliss. And I know I have Councilmember Wolf requesting the floor, as well as Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen. Councilmember Wolf, were you on this point, or?
I had something else. So if you guys want to keep finishing what you're talking about, I can wait.
Is that, thank you, appreciate that courtesy. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, was it on this point?
Yeah, I think one of the things is when in reading the sentence that sets up A1 through 7, its memberships appointed to the committee shall represent and have the primary expertise in the following. And then B talks about expertise again. And so as I think about membership, I'm thinking about, so I think that might be part of the alignment that's also aiding to the confusion, perhaps, is that you are talking about expertise in two different areas, where what I would expect to see under membership would be about who are the types of people we would be seeking in members. And that's where the community-based organizations make a lot of sense, because it's the type of members that you think are important to be a part of the dialogue, where community engagement is a verb, not a noun, and that the verbs belong under B, expertise. And so maybe I'm just wondering if that might help and might be part of where I understand what Councilmember Chambliss is saying, and I think what I'm expecting to see is not, and you see it with local government, right? Community organizations is like local government. community engagement is not like community organizations. Does that make sense? Is that helpful, Tara?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
Councilmember
that's helpful.
Emerson.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it, Ms. Beard.
I actually, I think I understand you, but I will be honest. I still hear what you're saying as something different than what Councilmember Chambliss was saying, which that last go you had at it, Councilmember Chambliss, I think I got it. And I think what, you know, if I were to understand and frame what perhaps would be characterized as sort of a friendly amendment to the current red line version, it would include 7 would read community engagement, parens, community organizing, arts-based entertainment, engagement strategy to address equitable development. And then in parentheses again, you know, planning economic or community development engagement representing traditionally underrepresented communities. Was that accurate? And sort of a special need in the engagement realm to call out that particular expertise versus the broader umbrella of saying all of the expertise categories should have at least one member with demonstrated equitable, you know, outcome experience. So I think maybe I got one, but now maybe I don't. There's a new one that I don't get. I'm sorry.
Great.
Yeah.
And Councilmember Bento has a comment regarding this item, but just to return to Councilmember Chambliss, is the language that Ms. Beard is suggesting getting at getting at what you're looking for?
Yeah, it's getting closer, but if it's the members that should have expertise in addressing equitable development, then yes, what she has stated is correct. So it just needs to be clear that the members should be participating in impactful community engagement, basically. And we can see that based on what is highlighted in yellow for the old community-based organizations. So yes, I'm okay with that.
Cool. And just to be clear, Ms. Beard, you recommended a slight change in the proposed language, correct?
If I shouldn't, Lisa, please jump in. I'm getting a little out of my protocol awareness, but yes. And I don't know, I can't share a screen, can I? But if we were looking at the red line version of the bylaws and we were looking at Article 2, I can, thank you, Greg. Okay, let's see. Sure. Okay. So let me zoom in a little bit and just show in real time what I think I'm hearing and make sure it's correct. Okay, so it looks, what I'm hearing is that we would take this.
Mr. Chair, can everyone else see the screen except me?
I can't see it.
Okay. Let's see, I'll try again. Did that work?
Yes, Tara, we can see that. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Michelle. Sorry about that. So I'm seeing this highlighted text, the 2 address equitable development, and then the statement in parentheses after that would be added after community engagement and before the examples of the particular types of professional expertise.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking. I had it highlighted in yellow. I did the highlighting, so that's where it is.
Right. Okay.
So, okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thanks, Councilmember Jones. I didn't see any yellow when you said that. Okay, where am I supposed to be
Yeah, that's
looking?
because I did it on my document.
Okay. So that is a recommended or a proposed change to the language, correct?
Yes.
Thanks. And I'll really say I'm glad we're having this conversation. And excuse me. I will say one of the things that I'm encouraged by is under the expertise section, so B2, where at least one member from each area of expertise represents or works directly with historically underrepresented communities. I think that's very powerful change to the bylaws, where then a review committee of applicants can use that as a grading and sort of scoring criteria to influence perhaps appointing people who have been underrepresented in the group. Cool. So, Councilmember Vento, you had something on this, and then I'll recognize Councilmember Wolf.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Along with you and Councilmember Lee, I served on the screening committee with Tara in this last round and found it very beneficial in terms of better understanding the kinds of expertise folks bring. And I'm very comfortable with the changes to this language, but I do want to stress, and this is a promise I've made to myself, and for this next round, when we've got appointments to this committee as well as all the other committees that need local representation, that I as a council member need to do a better job with outreach, and I need to help go out and find those people with the kind of expertise that we need on these various committees, because the printed notices don't always seal the deal, and folks need encouragement. They need to know that these opportunities are available. And many times we know folks and we just haven't stopped to think about how they'd be a good fit for some of these committees. So, you know, this language change is important, but what's also important is our willingness to really make an effort to recruit candidates for the various positions. And I want to echo what others have said about both Mayor Joe Emerson and Tara Beard. They do a tremendous job, as does the entire committee, and I just want to thank you for your work.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I would just also add that during my time on Minneapolis City Council, we had a priority and objective to diversify the membership of our boards and commissions. This took years to put together. We really changed the way we did outreach. We diversified the applicant pool over this time by 30%. So we were very successful at the recruitment and outreach, and the actual membership of the boards and commissions was less diverse at the end of that time. And so it was really the appointing authorities who were the problem, who were keeping the boards from becoming more diverse. So I agree with you 100%, Councilmember Bento, on the outreach, and then the follow through is important. Councilmember Wolf, thank you for your patience. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the Livable Communities programs, we've had huge under participation by large swaths of the region. And I don't see anything about understanding development out in more rural areas or on the fringe in any of this. I mean, it looks like we're going all in for equity and not even considering whether people understand what development is like out in the hinterlands. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Wolf.
Councilmember Wolf, were you going to say? I'm sorry to interrupt everybody. Councilmember Wolf, were you going to finish the thought? It sounded like you were going to say something.
I'm waiting for somebody else to say, am I right? Or, I mean, like, we're putting a lot of emphasis on one area, both in the scoring and in the membership, but we've never had any effort to make membership understand development in the places that don't participate as much, or don't even bother to apply, or if they do apply, don't get awarded.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like Ms. Beard has a response, and it looks like Councilmember Johnson wants to weigh in as well. Ms. Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Wolf, our intention is definitely to express how important that diversity of kind of geographic type is. We do have in Section B also, again, meaning to apply to all the categories that we should strive to include representatives with perspectives from across a range of community types, from urban to suburban to small town. If that is not capturing what I think we share the same intent. So if that language does not capture your intent, I'd love to know that. Thanks.
Councilmember Wolf, did you want to respond? Otherwise, I'll recognize Councilmember Johnson.
Well, we're saying that half of the people have to be representing diverse communities, but that just there will be maybe somebody that understands small town. We're kind of getting back to the issue that kind of like what Reva brought up, except that hers is getting well represented, and the understanding for small towns is going to be more of a footnote, and that's where we're really failing. We are not getting anything hardly in suburbs other than a handful of suburbs that regularly apply, and nothing from the outer communities, the freestanding communities.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I think Councilmember Wolf has a point, and I know Tara right now is working on cities all over the place that haven't signed up yet, encouraging them to sign up. But I would say, if in any sense that the scales are not tipped where they've got a shot, it's going to continue to be hard to get them to participate. So I'm all for the equity, and I really want that expertise around, you know, diverse communities and engagement. But in that diversity is geographic diversity as well. And where we really lack, I think, impact, because, you know, we've got smaller communities that aren't participating. So I'll just share in my concern that whenever we can reach and emphasize that, that's important as well. So I don't have any quarrels with where this is going as it's written, but I think we do need to keep an eye on those, you know, suburban edge and more rural communities that they're just not there. And I will say to Councilmember Bento's point, I literally over the last year, and I have to get better at this now, again, I've let up a little bit, but just going to the city councils and asking people to apply, and trying to, you know, dig out some of those, so those voices are heard. If they are appointed, those voices are heard. So that's all I'd have to say. So just appreciate that comment.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Chair Lilligren,
Yes,
Councilmember Atlas
Michelle.
Ingebrigtsen has her hand up,
Oh,
please.
great. Thanks. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen. Oh, there it went away.
I put it down because I was going to talk. Thanks for noticing,
all right.
Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Sorry, Councilmember.
So I just want to remind us that people of color, of ethnic diversity, live in small communities and in suburbs. And in fact, they're the fastest growing areas for these populations in the metro area. It's not happening in the urban core, it's happening in our exurban space. I live in a small suburban community. So I just think it's really important that we don't conflate having diverse voices with being geographically focused, or that it's exclusive to one community type versus another. I've had the lucky opportunity to work with people from diverse backgrounds from really rural communities just recently. And so I really want to just help us to remember that absolutely we want to be inclusive of all geography and recognize the particular challenges that small communities, mine being one of them, face in accessing this program. And also to be mindful that when we're talking about BIPOC people, we're not talking about people who live in one urban community or in large urban communities. It's very important for us to remember that, especially as they are where the majority of growth is happening in our more rural, exurban, and suburban communities. I just had a question about the explicitness around first generation immigrants. And I apologize because I was late coming into the meeting, so maybe that was asked before. And I'm just curious why we decided to, or why that was really important. I didn't want to make an assumption, but I hadn't seen that in a place other wise, unless it's a specific target audience. So I was just curious about that.
Thanks, Councilmember. Ms. Beard, do you have a
Yeah.
response?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, that's a great question. I think that very much came from our kind of awareness of some sort of hyper-local groupings of large populations of immigrants. For example, the Karen population in Roseville, or the East African population in Eden Prairie, and just wanting to make sure that we were keeping at the forefront kind of the variety of experiences that essentially non-white people have, and not get too focused on one particular race or ethnicity, but be as kind of open to the various groups that are historically excluded from the public process, which sometimes include both having, a skin color other than white, but also a language barrier, also a lack of familiarity with, laws because of, recent arrival to the country. So that was the intent, but I welcome any feedback on that.
I'm not being a part of this community. I don't want to speak for it. However, I just wonder about would we be setting up a situation where you would have a person whose parents were immigrants and identifies it. I just wonder, and I'm just wondering, that's a wonderment. I don't need an answer for it today, but I just think it's something to be mindful of. There's definitely times in my work where we have identified working with first generation immigrants, and it's typically because there's something super hyper specific that they experience being a new immigrant to the country legally or otherwise. And maybe that's a good reason to have it there. So I just wanted to throw that out as a question. And I support whatever way you decide, to go, but just thought it might be something to think about. And then just, I want to give a quick ditto to a lot of the tactics that Chair Lilligren shared. The thing I was thinking about is that when we talk about diversifying these things, it's great for us to reach out, but that's also leveraging our positional power. I think it's just as important to make sure that we're using strategic approaches to make sure that what change you can get into how these groups are brought about sustains beyond our membership on this table. Because if it's rooted in us doing recruitment, then when we're gone, it can go away. And so things that come to mind for me and that we employed in MPOS that led us to a great diverse pool, which led us to having great diverse membership, was making sure that we identify how to best communicate with the audiences that we want to recruit. And I hope we also are encouraging people and thinking about the barriers to their participation. Some might be the time frame of application or resources, understanding the application. I've gotten a lot of questions about when are we going to start including low income people in some of our conversations. And so thinking about how do we engage with some of them? Maybe we pull and invite some folks who've been on the advisory committee for our housing stipends. We have had some advisory committee for people who participate in that program who are residents. Maybe we cross-pollinate and look in places like that. Also really thinking about the timeline, that it gives enough time for people to consider, and having a really great packet that can be provided to people that like a recruitment packet that has the job description, that talks about the time, a calendar of meetings, that talks about the types of things, and that answers some of those questions that prevent people from participating who haven't done things like this before because they perceive it's maybe not something that's appropriate for them, or they haven't known someone who's done it. Those are just some thoughts I wanted to share. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And Mayor Emerson, something to add? Mayor Emerson, I'm not hearing you. Oh, yeah, you're still muted.
Oh, great. Anyway, thank you. I want to talk about the urban, small town, suburban. That's been a concern for the committee all along, and I'm speaking as an elected official and a former president of the League of Minnesota Cities, so I'm familiar with small cities, big cities, etc. And I think staff is trying to look at possibly some ways we can make the process easier, because these smaller communities don't have a big staff to write these things. So this is something that I think needs to be looked at further down the road, is that we've got to make this a simpler process so those that don't have the resources can submit an application, because we on the committee are all going, we'd love to see more from the smaller communities. We really would like to see them be part of this so they can grow and do what they need to do. My 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, it's interesting, Councilmember Singer-Britzman, because I just kind of breezed through first-generation immigrants. I didn't really think anything of it until you brought up your comment, and it is interestingly specific language. And then within a household, you'll have, you know, pan-generation immigrant families. So, yeah, interesting. And I think, and Ms. Beard, maybe you can confirm with the reference to the different community types, urban, suburban, and small town, that's new language, right? I don't see it in any of the old language, so it may not be perfect, but we're moving in the direction of inclusion of smaller communities. Is that accurate, Tara? Is that the first time?
Mr. Chair, I think it's an attempt to be more specific about what we're getting at in the previous language, which was to include representatives with perspectives of developed and developing communities, which it can be kind of interpreted, you know, when you start to think about developed versus redeveloped, and redevelopment can happen in a lot of communities. And so we were trying to be more specific than just saying developed and developing, and say it's community types from urban to suburban to small town, tracking a little bit more in line with like the community designation kind of conversation without calling them out specifically.
Great, thanks.
Excuse me, Chair Lilligren.
Yeah,
Councilmember
Michelle.
Wolf has her hand raised.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't suggesting that people of color or people with disabilities or anybody else on the list doesn't live in smaller towns. I was comparing the large emphasis on one and the small emphasis. Yeah, it's better language, but it's still a very small emphasis in the criteria on understanding different parts of the geography. There's small rural towns that have serious redevelopment needs, as well as development opportunity, you know, greenfield opportunities that just don't feel like they're like going in front of this group would even be anybody that would understand anything they have to say. Where the whole Met Council is sort of a alien creature to some of our more rural communities, and I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that we're missing a large part of our geography with this program.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I think that speaks to a larger, what Wendy is saying, it speaks to maybe a larger issue about inclusion and what are some of the barriers to participating in our community development opportunities in general. And I think we need to take a look at that as a whole.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chair?
Councilmember. Councilmember Johnson.
I'll just pile onto this too. So on that point, again, my understanding when Councilmember Wolf raised the point was exactly what she said. I, don't presume that people of color are not living in the rural or ex-urban parts of our region, but I know, the mindset of some of my city councils out there where it's just really difficult for them to participate and get engaged or feel that they're, going to be able to take advantage of the program, which we know about. And I just want to give a shout out to Tara because she's working on that and doing outreach, and we're trying to weave that in. But, just so that we have the broadest way to be inclusive so that people who live in these communities from all walks of life have the opportunity to share and participate. But I do think it's really important that we continue to work on what the barriers are for those elected and appointed officials in communities that aren't leveraging the program or interested in the program or don't feel like they fit into our program, because no matter who lives in their community, then nobody benefits. So, I think we're on the right track, and I think staff has been working hard on this, but any continued input across the board is good, right? We want to expand opportunity and get everybody there in seats that can help us see things that we're not seeing. If we keep doing things the same way, we're going to have the same outcomes over and over again. So I think it's been a good discussion, and I appreciate all points of view on this.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss. Is your hand up or?
I have to take my hand down.
Did you still want to speak?
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. Great discussion, and thanks. Thanks to you, Tara, and your team for this work. And thanks, Mayor Emerson, as well, for your service to the region, but your work on this. You can tell it's a lot of work to do stuff like this. And if there's no further discussion, staff has proposed the action that the Metropolitan Council approved the proposed amendments of the Livable Communities Advisory Committee as shown in the business item number 2021-109. So entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Lisa. We
Yeah.
did have a discussion about that addition
Right.
that Councilmember Chambliss
Right.
had, so I would
Thank you.
suggest that you amend that motion before making it.
Let's do that so we don't have to do it by action. So with the amendment as discussed, and that Ms. Beard proposed, I would entertain a motion for approval.
Johnson moves.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Bento seconds.
Thank you, council members. Discussion on that motion? And everyone's clear what we're voting on, right? It's the amended language that emerged from our discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. That motion carries, and thanks for the great discussion, committee members. And again, Ms. Beard, please thank your team members for the work. And Mayor Emerson, please thank your colleagues on the advisory committee. With that, we will move on to our second. Was someone saying something? No, okay. With that, we'll move on to our second business item, our second and final business item, item 2021-102. It's the City of Greenfield Agricultural Preserves Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And Ms. Thamman is here to present. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Great. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Freya Thamman, and I'm the sector representative for District 1. And today I'll be presenting the City of Greenfield's Agricultural Preserves Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And this is the first amendment to the city's 2040 Comprehensive Plan. I'd like to thank the City of Greenfield's consulting planner, Brad Scheib. Brad is here today, and he's available to answer any questions on this amendment from the city's perspective. Next slide, please. Before getting into specifics of the amendment, I'll provide a brief overview of three things: the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program and its purpose, the council's role with the program, as well as the city's authority. The Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program was established by statute in 1980 to encourage and preserve areas planned and zoned for long-term agricultural use in the region. It established a local and regional planning process to designate agricultural areas as a long-term land use. The purpose of the statute is to encourage the use of agricultural lands for the production of food and other agricultural products. The program provides incentive to maintain viable, productive farm operations in the metro through a special tax classification that results in reduced property taxes. In addition, the program also is intended to provide protection from the imposition of unnecessary special assessments. Next slide, please. When it comes to the program, the Metropolitan Council's role relates to two responsibilities. The Council's role includes preparing annual reports which discuss the program, summarize participation in the program, and maintains maps illustrating lands within the region that are enrolled in the program. The most recent report, the 2019 Agricultural Preserves Program Annual Report, was presented to the committee on August 3rd, 2020. Our role also relates to the Council's responsibility for review of local comprehensive plans. For land that's enrolled in the program, a community is expected to appropriately guide land for agriculture and protect land at maximum densities to ensure program eligibility. As relates to the Ag Preserve program, the council reviews comprehensive plans to ensure that lands enrolled in the program are mapped and that the city is protecting them at a density of 1 unit per 40 acres. Next slide, please. When it comes to expiration from the program, typically the landowner that enrolled in the program initiates expiration. However, as shown here on the slide, the city also has the authority to initiate a property's expiration from the program. The city initiated expiration process includes amending the comprehensive plan, which is the impetus for the action before you today. Although the city initiates expiration, the actual expiration from the program is 8 years from the date of the city's notice of expiration. So it's an 8-year time period. Next slide, please. So the city's amendment before you today covers all properties within the city that are enrolled in the Agricultural Preserve Program. The areas affected by the amendment are shown in red here and total 770 acres. I'll describe the amendment details in an upcoming slide, but this slide shows the amendment areas as relates to the city's Thrive MSP 2040 community designations. So as shown here, Thrive designates the city mostly as diversified rural in green. And then there's a smaller area that's designated as emerging suburban edge in yellow. With the exception of the southernmost property, all affected properties are in the diversified rural area. The southernmost property is in the emerging suburban edge area of the city. And this area is within the city's local wastewater treatment plant service area. As indicated in the review record for the city's plan, the city has more than enough land to meet its forecasted growth to 2040. Next slide, please. This map shows the regional systems in relation to the amendment sites, which includes Lake Rebecca Regional Park Reserve, as well as several planned regional trails. As mentioned, the city has its own local wastewater treatment plant, and there's a small amount of regional sewer service, 60 units, that are allocated near Lake Sarah within the city. The city is not planned to receive any additional regional wastewater service and is not included in the council's long-term sewer service area as shown and discussed in Figure 5 of the staff report. Next slide, please. This slide discusses the details of the proposed amendment, which includes several parts. The amendment proposes to remove agricultural preserves as a land use category, and it also modifies maps to remove the agricultural preserve overlay. These changes result in land no longer being identified for long-term agricultural use at a maximum density of 1 unit per 40 acres. The amendment affects all properties that are enrolled in the Agricultural Preserve Program, which is 770 acres. In addition, the amendment included new text which identifies the city's intentions regarding agricultural preserves. The submittal indicated that the purpose of this amendment, as described by the city, is to enable property owners to more freely consider development potential or participate in public improvements associated with development when such improvements benefit the adjacent property or result in more efficient development patterns. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the city's future land use map before the amendment. It identifies agricultural preserve properties with a black overlay hatch, and you can kind of see those in the west central area of the city. They're a little harder to see on this slide, but the egg preserve parcels are identified, and then the associated text within the plan, the comprehensive plan, has agricultural preserves as a future land use category, indicating that these areas are protected at 1 unit per 40 acres. Next slide. This slide shows the amendment's future land use map without egg preserves identified as a long-term use. The amendment also removed discussion of agricultural preserves as a future land use, and so these two components were removed from the city's plan. The amendment also included new text which discussed the city's resolution to remove egg preserves as a land use designation so that the lands are no longer planned for long-term agriculture. It states that this will lead to removal of all lands enrolled in the agricultural preserve program by 2028 or sooner. As mentioned, most of the agricultural preserve parcels within Greenfield are in the diversified rural designation. Frequently, large portions of communities in the diversified rural area also contain prime agricultural soils. Although these communities are not designated as agricultural communities in Thrive, the Council supports the preservation of agricultural lands in these areas. The Council encourages local governments to promote and preserve agricultural lands and reduce development pressures on these lands. With this amendment, instead of being shown as ag preserve, these areas are primarily shown as rural residential. Based on the city's historic development pattern and previous comprehensive plan approvals, the plan's rural residential area has a density of 1 unit per 5 acres. This proposed amendment and the removal of egg preserves is inconsistent with Thrive policies supporting the use of the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program to preserve prime agricultural soils and as a long-term land use, and also does not support economic opportunities for farmers or promote local food production. Next slide, please. Staff review of the proposed amendment for conformance with regional system plans, consistency with council policies, and compatibility with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions finds that the amendment conforms to regional system plans with no substantial impact or departure from these plans, that the amendment is consistent with council policies with the exception of policies encouraging preservation of agricultural lands. It is consistent with housing policy, with water resource management, and is consistent with council forecasts. And that the plan is compatible with the plan of adjacent and affected jurisdictions with concerns that were noted by Hennepin County as well as Franklin Township. And those concerns have been identified and included in the staff report as figures 6 and 7. Next slide, please. So the proposed action before you today is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the City of Greenfield to place its comprehensive plan amendment into effect, find that the amendment does not change the city's forecasts, strongly encourage the city to support the purpose and intent of the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program to protect locally important agricultural areas and support existing agricultural uses as primary long-term land uses in the comprehensive plan in order to manage growth in a manner that protects farmland and regional agricultural economy. And then finally, to advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for land use. And with that, I will be glad to answer any questions. And as I mentioned, the city's consulting planner, Brad Scheib, is also here, should you have any questions from the city's perspective on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond, for the report and for your work on this, and thanks to Mr. Scheib as well for his work. and for being present. Questions or just comments on that report? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So reading between the lines here, I kind of wonder that property owner that's right by all of the development, it says in the report that there's half of them were opposed and half were either neutral or okay with it. Was that property that's right by the developed area, were they opposed?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wolf.
Yeah.
Councilmember Wolf references one of the properties that's in the agricultural preserve program. It's the one property that was actually a landowner initiated expiration from the program, and they've been a long time in the agricultural preserves program. But I would ask the city if they could respond to that question, because they would have the best idea of who exactly was opposed and for this amendment.
Mr. Scheib, do you have a response?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brad Scheib. I'm a consultant for the city. The property owner that you were speaking to, Commissioner Wolf, was, as Freya mentioned, one that has already enrolled to come out. They're planning on development. In fact, they're working with a couple brokers now trying to put their property up for development. So they're one that was already coming out. Other property owners that are planning to come out, that haven't come out yet, were in a trust. And they were recently, one of the reasons we initiated this now is a development adjacent to them was proposed, and the logical place for a street connection was between that development proposal and a property that was enrolled in ag preserve. At the time we were doing this, they were interested in partnering and developing their property, and then they realized they were in ag preserve, and it was they couldn't come out for 8 years. Now that was before some recent amendments to the ag preserve statute that would actually probably allow them to come out today. It's kind of unclear, but I think the intent of one of the recent amendments to that ag preserve statute would be to enable a property like that to come out. But at the time, that ag preserve prevented them from moving forward. So that's one of the reasons that they were pursuing this now. Another property is looking to sell their property and wants to get out now. So those are the ones that have mentioned they're willing to get out now.
Thank you, Mr. Scheib. And Councilmember Johnson, did you still want to see the slides that show the different parcels?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, whenever we can, bring those up if it is helpful for people. But if not, no worries. We're kind of past it now.
Thanks. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Scheib. Yeah. So thanks.
Mr. Chair, can I follow up?
Yeah, please, Councilmember Wolf.
So if the rules are changing now and people can maybe get out when they want to, what is the purpose of forcing out the people who don't want to get out?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission.
Yeah.
There is still a lot of process that we have to go through. So let's say a property owner does want to get out and we've still got them enrolled in the program. The statute says we first have to amend the comprehensive plan and amend the zoning ordinance, and that process takes 3 to 4 months to get through. And so for anyone who's enrolled in the program, if they wish to get out, simply the process that the statute defines requires we go through a delay.
Councilmember Wolf?
Okay, I mean, it sounds like they're following the rules and they can do whatever they want, whether we like it or not. We have to say yes legally. But I find it kind of disturbing that they would force some people out that don't want to be out. But I guess that's their local authority choice to do that, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. I feel bad for the people who are being forced out against their will, but it doesn't sound like we have the legal right to say no.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we get some clarification on that very point that Councilmember Wolf made? What is the ramifications if we deny this amendment today?
Ms. Thamman, do you have a response? Or
Mr. Chair and council members, our review of this amendment really lies on whether this amendment conforms with regional system plans. And in those cases, if there was an issue, we then could go through a plan modification process. In this case, this amendment conforms to our regional system plans. And so that is really where our authority is strongest. It is not consistent with Thrive policies in regards to preservation of agricultural land. And so in this case, what our authority leads to is for us encouraging the city to follow the purpose and intent of the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program. So our policies are to encourage and support those, and that's what the proposed actions are leading to.
Councilmember Lindstrom?
Thank you. So I understand now. It conforms to our plans, technically. It does conform to our plans. It does not conform to our policies. But for what they're asking for, it really just needs to conform to our plans.
Further discussion, Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been watching this issue for quite a time. It's in my district. It's been contentious. The landowners that don't want to be removed from this land use designation are very passionate about it. And when they have contacted me, I encourage them to work with the Planning Commission and work with the council members. That's that first layer of local control. And, you know, it's been a split vote coming along, which was in the record. I have just one question about the process. So, Ms. Thamman, I think it's interesting too, like we, you know, well, actually the city through the process puts out for comment the adjacent jurisdiction. So the township, I have to look at I don't have I have them all up open on my thing, but the township, I believe it's a township next door. Mm-hmm. And then Hennepin County had very, you know, direct comments about not supporting this to our policies that are in Thrive, right? So I think it's interesting. It's really important to get that other comments involved, but you know, if it doesn't affect the systems plan, then to what end? So it's frustrating, I guess, is what I'm saying. And then I would ask this question. So the date this goes into effect, so we would authorize it. So then they could put it into effect, and there's an 8-year window. Is that I mean, is that the full 8 years? Could it happen sooner, or is there an 8-year window for landowners to get ready for the designation to change? That's my first question.
Ms. Thamman?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, if a property has not already initiated expiration, then the city's initiation of expiration starts that 8-year time clock. So in some cases, like this property that Councilmember Wolf had mentioned, it had initiated expiration, and that one is expiring in October of 2022. But for any property that has not initiated expiration, it's that time period of the 8-year time clock starting at the city's notice of expiration.
And I have to do a couple of follow-up questions. So what would happen within that 8 years if the Planning Commission members changed, City Council members changed? Could this be revisited and re-amended back before the expiration hit? Now, I'm sure that, you know, I'm just curious of process because it's a political decision. That's what brings us to this point. So I'm curious about in that 8-year window, if they would, you know, because it is a split vote on the council and at planning, less so on the council, but is that something where anybody at landowners still might have some ability if they want to enact change at the voting booth? Or is it just once it's set in motion, it's set in motion and it can't be changed thereafter?
Mr. Chair, and Councilmember Johnson and Lisa, please let me know if there's pieces that might be included in this. But my understanding is that if there were changes in the community's feelings in regards to this, that it could be revisited to allow re-enrollment of those properties into the program. But Lisa, I don't know if there's anything else that might be good background in regards to process in regards to this, but my understanding is that there's that option for discussion in the future and re-enrollment.
Director
Mr. Chair,
Barajas, anything to add?
yeah, Mr. Chair, Council Members Freya has that right. It's removing it from the comp plan means they'd have to amend their comp plan, of course, to bring all of those properties back in, or other properties. I think we'd have to relook at some of the requirements for certifying land as eligible as well, that there are different steps that a city has to go through on eligibility to certify lands in order to change the comp plan as well, to make sure that they've met all of the statutory requirements. It's been a little while since communities have been required to do that. So there are more process steps, but it's still an option.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for those responses. I mean, this is just one of those things that's, you know, I really do respect local control and I respect the process. And for me, you know, there's conflict at Met Council when you look at our policies versus our systems plans, but you know, the higher order is the systems plan. And so, you know, the landowners that are not interested in losing this designation have, several of them have reached out to me, but you know, the process has to work as well. And so we have what I see is a bit of a well-defined role in this, even though, you know, there might be differences of opinion on as the letters that came in around this kind of stated. So for me, it's been really interesting, and I don't know where this will end. But ultimately, the city has the authority to do this, and you know, that is up to their constituents and their voters to support or not. And we have to do our job, and that might feel uncomfortable for some. And I know for the landowners, it's very painful. You know, and I think unless there's some other legal footing that, you know, we could stand on, I just don't know what else we could be doing with this. And ultimately, I think we have to, you know, stand with who's got the authority to ultimately make the decision, and the city initiated it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Shive, did you want to weigh in? I might have missed your hand from earlier. I apologize, Mr. Shive.
No, that's okay. I think just to try to help people understand this a little bit more, it is a political issue. You're 100% correct, and I know that Commissioner Johnson, they've been reaching out to you specifically. What I will say is the council has made every effort to listen to all of those concerns, and the response to the 4 or so property owners that want to stay in, one of them had already enrolled to get out, and they were very confused. They felt that they really didn't mean to enroll to get out, and so they wanted to get back in, but there was a real difficult challenge of understanding how they get back in, because they had let time lapse before they requested to get back in. We ultimately resolved that, and we let the applicant get back in, simply because they wanted to be treated like everybody else, and the council said okay. So they have 8 years, like has been mentioned, from the date we notice, which we're not noticing them until we finish the comp plan amendment and publish the zoning ordinance. And so they'll have 8 years. During that 8 years, we have time to see if there are other programs and tools that can work to protect them or provide them the same benefits. The benefit that most of the property owners are most interested in is protecting them from special assessments. And just so you all know, we did a lot of work with all the property owners. The tax benefit themselves, it's not a big deal to them. It's still important to some of them, but it's not the driver. The driver is the statute prevents special assessments from being levied on them. And in Greenfield's case, the only real special assessments that will be impacted on some of the property owners are road reconstruction. And so if you reconstruct a road and you pass the cost on to the benefiting property owners, those property owners won't benefit today, but they will as soon as they develop their property. And ag preserve is not a permanent protection. It's voluntary. They can come out when they apply to come out. And so all of those things are contributing factors to this. So we think in Greenfield's case, there's a better tool to provide those agricultural protections. It's also important to note that 770 acres that are enrolled in the program is a fraction of the land in Greenfield that's used for agricultural purposes. And so we know there are other tools, other programs out there to help agriculture continue. And we have an 8-year period to try to figure out if there's a conservation approach or agricultural protection approach that can balance both the needs of the city as well as the ag property owners. We've also recently amended our code so that properties that are currently enrolled in ag preserve can continue to operate conforming the way they're currently operating today, and even to a degree if they've got, for example, one property owner has some grain bins in storage facilities, they want to add another grain bin. We've amended our codes to enable that to happen. So the city is trying to work with those property owners and also is trying to explore other tools and mechanisms in which we can still preserve that agricultural ability.
Thanks for that explanation, Mr. Scheib. Further discussion on this report, Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen. You're muted, Councilmember.
No matter how many meetings I'm in, I still manage to do that. I don't know what it's gonna take. But anyhow, sorry about that. But I just wonder, you know, one of the things that's really challenging for me is the role we play and the policy versus the practice or the plan. And so I think it would just be helpful for issues like this when it comes up in the future for staff to really be clear about what agency we have and what agency we don't. And that to me is still not clear yet today. I've heard that people are like, well, wish we have one thing that tells us one thing and something else that tells us something else, and that something else is a higher priority. And but I'm not hearing a whole lot of confidence from the council members around the decision that people sounds like are feeling like they need to make. And that just doesn't feel like a place of strength. I understand that things are complex and we have had the practice of supporting local decision making. We also have, especially when it comes to things like preservation of land, there's also the greater good. And we have to balance that as well. And so I don't know that that's really a pointed question, but it's what I'm dealing with and feeling like I'm hearing and wishing was different in the conversation for myself and for my colleagues.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on this report? Discussion. Councilmember Johnson, thanks for your direct involvement in this and these kind of difficult or hot political issues, local issues, and I think you did a great job sort of weighing out the pathway to kind of where we are today. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may just add one, thank you. You know, and again, to Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen's point, sorry, I have a barky dog. You know, these are hard issues because your heart, mind might tell you one thing, but you know, the role you play is a different role. And just as an example, over the years, you know, on city council, if we had decisions to make, if it was a comp plan amendment or a zoning amendment, we knew we had the highest and best authority. Peanut, stop it. And sometimes we'd have a conditional use permit item that we were very passionate about, but we had very, very, very restricted authority on that. And that might be where your council chambers are full. And I think the hardest part of doing the job well is knowing what your role is, regardless of what you might feel. And that's really hard. And I'm not saying that as a, you know, everybody's got to come to their conclusions the way they are. But for me on this one, you know, you know, we have a limited role. If it meets our systems planning, and it has, you know, that's where the locals have that voice and that role to work this out at the local level. And they've been doing that for quite some time, to not to the pleasure of all. But you know, our role is different than theirs. So it's an emotional one for many people, but you know, it's clear from my point of view, sorry, that it's our authority is vested in, does it meet the systems plan?
Thank you, Councilmember. Director Brajas, did you want to add something? I noticed you came on camera. Okay, all right. Thanks for this great discussion, Ms. Thamman. Thanks for bringing this forward, and Mr. Scheib, thanks for being here too. And Thamman has proposed an action that a series of actions that authorize the City of Greenfield to place its comprehensive plan amendment into effect. Is there a motion to approve, please? Motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee, I heard first, and then Councilmember Johnson has a second. Thank you. Lisa, did you want to say something? My video is really bad, so it looked like you were raising your hand for a second.
No, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I was
All
just
right,
closing my
thanks.
shades.
Okay, all right, thanks. Thanks. Yeah, my video on WebEx is just choppy. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Atlas Ingebrigtsen,
Abstain?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That motion carries. And that's our final item on our agenda today. And unless there are items of committee members or Lisa, anyone? Yeah, Director Brajas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to share some really good news with you all today that you'll also
Yay.
see in the daily report. You might remember back in September, or maybe not, because it was quite some time ago now, staff had come to you to ask for your support in adopting a resolution for our application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for their mobility demonstration program. Well, we just heard on Friday that we were awarded the mobility demonstration program partnerships
Yay.
with the city of
Good news.
Minneapolis. We are only one of 9 agencies that was selected in the nation. So that will come with some funding and some new vouchers as well. So we're really excited for this. Wanted to share some good news with you today.
Thank you. That is
Awesome,
good news.
awesome.
And I
Well
do have
done.
to say, like, Terry Smith and the team, just really excellent work here.
Yeah, thank you. Please pass along. The emojis are just flying. Please pass along our congratulations and thanks to Terry and her team for sure. And well done for you as well. It's a big deal. Well, any this is fun. Any other items? Anyone?
Yeah, when are we going to celebrate?
Yeah,
Like in person.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the start of Indian Month in Minnesota, and we had like some kickoff events here today, and they were masked and distanced and everything. But it's the first time I've been in community for like a year, and it felt so good. So, well, anything else? Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned. Have a good one, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.
Everyone, have a good week. Thank you.